Okay, the last part of rational expressions and rational equations unit is just solving rational equations. So this is it for this type of stuff. And I think it's a little bit easier than adding and subtracting because we could get rid of the denominators. Okay, so what you need to do is find your common denominator first. And in order to do that, you have to factor denominators where you can. So you're looking at all of the denominators in the equation, and then I'm going to find the common denominator. So number one, I'm looking at all three of these denominators, and I know that they could all match with 3, right? They all have 3, but you can never make your denominator smaller. So between the x's, right, it's got to be the bigger exponent between the x's, so it's going to be x squared. So when I say cancel the denominators by multiplying each numerator by what the denominator is missing from the common denominator is, if I wanted to make this an x squared, or sorry, a 3x squared, I want to make it the common denominator, what do you have to multiply that by? Well, I need to multiply it by x. Well, instead of multiplying the top and bottom by that, I'm just going to multiply the numerator by x and get rid of the denominator. Okay, so that's just going to become 1 times x, which is x. Okay, here, this already has my common denominator, so I'm going to get rid of that. But make sure you distribute your negative. So this is going to become minus x plus 2. So the negative is going to both things in the numerator. So I'm going to put minus x plus 2 equals, this already has my common denominator, so I'm going to cross that out. And I have 5x minus 10. Okay, so now my denominator is gone, and I have a super simple equation to solve. So combine your like terms, because I'm going to solve for x. So that's 0, so 2 equals 5x minus 10. Then I'm going to add 10 to both sides. So 12 equals 5x. Divide by 5. So x equals 12/5, and that's your final answer. Okay? So number 2, my common denominator. Well, 2 to 6, I can make those all match at 6, right? And there's a v here that I need to take into account, so I need a v in my common denominator. Okay, so ask yourself, what do I have to multiply 2 by to make it 6v? Well, I need to multiply by 3 and v, so I'm going to multiply the numerator by 3v and cross out the denominator. That becomes 9v. Same thing for the second one. I need to multiply by 3v, cross out the denominator, I get 3v. I'll make that plus, minus, and then this already has my common denominator, so you don't need to multiply by anything, and that's just going to become minus 1. Okay, then we need to solve for v, so I need to get v to the other side. So that's 6v equals negative 1, divide by 6, so v equals negative 1/6. And then you're done. Okay, number 3 is a little bit different because I don't know what the common denominator is yet. It's not as simple because I didn't factor yet. So what you need to do is factor each denominator that you can. So I know I could factor this. This becomes n and n, and it's got to multiply to be 25, but add to be 10. That's 5 and 5. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. It actually factors out to be the same thing because it's the same trinomial. I'm going to cross that out. So looking at every single denominator, these two denominators have 2 n plus 5s. This one only has 1. Well, you could only go bigger, not smaller. So the common denominator is 2 n plus 5s. So what you're going to do is first distribute your negative, and then you're going to multiply by what this is missing. So this denominator is missing one of the n plus 5s. So I'm going to multiply the numerator by n plus 5 and cross out this denominator. Okay, and then you're going to multiply n plus 5 times 1, which is n plus 5. The second one already has your common denominator, so I'm just going to cross that out, and I'm going to write plus negative 6 equals, and this already has my common denominator, so I'm just going to write the numerator 2n minus 4. Okay, I'm going to combine my like terms, so n minus 1 equals 2n minus 4. I'm going to get n by itself. So I'm going to add 4. So n equals 3. Okay, number 4. So before I find the common denominator, you have to factor. So this is a difference of two squares right here. So r and r, the square root of 36 is 6. 1's plus, 1's minus. Same thing over here. R and r, 6 and 6, 1's plus, 1's minus. Well, this one has an r plus 6. These both already match. They already have the common denominator. So what this middle one is missing is the r minus 6. So the common denominator is r plus 6, r minus 6. Okay? Well, this first one already has the common denominator, so I'm just going to cross out the denominator and rewrite the numerator. Okay? In the second fraction, this r plus 6 is missing r minus 6 from the denominator, from the common denominator, so I'm going to multiply by r minus 6, and I'm going to cross out the denominator. Make sure you distribute that 5, so it becomes 5r minus 30, and this already has my common denominator, so I'm going to cross it out and just write 42. I don't need to multiply by anything. Okay, so combine your like terms. Okay, so it becomes very important right here that you're paying attention. So notice that I have r squared left. If you have a variable that is squared in your equation, you have to solve by factoring. What that means is you have to get everything over to one side, set it equal to 0. Okay, I have to solve by factoring because I have an r squared left. So what I'm going to do is subtract over the 5r and the 12. Okay, this is only when you have a variable squared left. Okay, so this is r squared plus r minus 20 equals 0. And now you're going to factor this right here. So go into your two parentheses. I know it's r, and it's got to multiply to be negative 20, but add to be 1. So that's positive 5, negative 4. And remember, to get our two answers, we set both equal to 0 and solve. So r equals negative 5, r equals positive 4. Okay, you will see that on your homework. So again, factoring keeps coming up over and over and over again. Okay, number 5. This one's kind of nice because it doesn't have any factoring. So our common denominator, I see an m plus 2, and I see one with an m minus 4, so you're just going to combine them. Okay? So this one is missing the m minus 4, so I'm going to multiply by m minus 4. Cross out your denominator, so I get m minus 4 equals, again, this one, second one is missing m minus 4. I'm going to cross out the denominator. Now, since it's a binomial times a binomial, you got to FOIL. So I get m times m, that's m squared. M times 5, that's 5m. Negative 4 times m is negative 4m, and then negative 20. Plus, well, this denominator is missing the m plus 2 from the common denominator. So multiply the numerator by m plus 2, cross out the m minus 4, and distribute. So 3m plus 6. Okay, I'm going to combine my like terms. So 5m minus 4m, that's 1m, plus 3m, that's 4m. And then negative 20 plus 6, that's negative 14. Okay, now I have an m squared left, so you're solving by factoring. That means you have to set everything equal to 0. So I'm going to bring over this m and 4. So I get 0 equals m squared plus 3m minus 10. Now you're going to factor. So two parentheses. I know m goes in the front. It's got to multiply to be negative 10, but add to be 3. That's positive 5, negative 2. Set both equal to 0 to get your two answers. So m equals -5, m equals +2. Okay, number 6. So I see some denominators that I could factor. So this becomes x and x. It's got to multiply to be -12, but add to be -4. That's -6 and +2. And the second one factors the same way because they're the same thing. Okay, and then before we even start multiplying things, I want you to change this to addition and distribute your negative. So this becomes a minus and that becomes a plus. Okay, the minus goes to both things in that fraction numerator. So hopefully looking at the denominators, you can see what the common denominator is. They all have x plus 2, so that's going to be a part of the common denominator. But the first one is missing the x minus 6. Okay, so when I am getting rid of my denominator, I'm going to multiply by what it's missing. So the other ones have x minus 6, so I have to multiply by x minus 6, cross this out, and distribute your 2. So 2x minus 12 equals, well, this already has my common denominator, so that's gone. So I'm just going to write the numerator 1. This already has the common denominator, so cross that out. You don't need to multiply by anything. And then write the numerator, that's minus 4x plus 2. Combine your like terms. Solve for x. So I don't need to get this set equal to 0 because there is no x squared. Okay, you're solving this like a normal equation. X is on one side, numbers on the other. So I'm going to bring over this 4x. So I get 6x minus 12 equals 3. Bring over the 12. Okay, divide by 6. So x equals, and we can simplify that by dividing both by 3, so 5/2. Okay, last one, number 7. Before I can find my common denominator, you have to factor where you can. So there's no GCF in this denominator, so you got to split up 5m and m. And then guess with factors of 2, so 2 and 1. It's got to be minus plus because it's multiplying me negative. Let's check. -5 plus 2, that's -3, so that does work. So I have a m minus 1, m minus 1, and then a 5m plus 2, so that's my common denominator. M minus 1, we're not going to worry about the 1 because it doesn't have a denominator, okay? So I'm going to multiply this first one by what it's missing from the common denominator. So it's missing the 5m plus 2. So I'm going to multiply by 5m plus 2. So you get 5m plus 2 equals, well, this next one already has the common denominator, so I'm not going to multiply by anything because it's not missing anything. So 4. And then the 1, even though it's not a fraction, you have to multiply by the common denominator. So it's missing both of those binomials from its denominator, so you got to multiply by both of those. So no denominator is getting canceled because technically it doesn't have one, but you have to multiply by the common denominator even though it's not a fraction. So we're going to FOIL that out, so that becomes 5m squared minus 5m plus 2m minus 1. Okay? And now I'm going to combine my like terms. Oop. So we have 5m squared. I have -5 plus 2, that's -3m. And then 4 minus 1, that's 3. Okay. Look, I have an m squared, which means I have to solve by factoring, so I have to get everything set equal to 0. So I'm going to bring over this 5m and the 2. So 0 equals 5m squared minus 8m plus 1. Okay, so now I have to solve by factoring. I think I made a mistake here. Let me see. Oh, I did. Sorry. This should be -2. So then this should be a 2. And then that's all I have left. Sorry, my bad. So those 2's cancels out. So again, I'm still solving by factoring. I just multiplied wrong. So to factor this, it doesn't go into 2 parentheses. What you're looking for is a GCF. So what they have in common is an m. So I'm going to factor out the m. So I have 5m minus 8 left in the parentheses. Now to get your 2 answers, I set m equal to 0. There's 1. And then 5m minus 8 equals 0. So 5m equals 8. Divide by 5. So m equals 8/5. And there's your 2 answers. Okay, now we're going to move on to the U-try, so pause the video and then come back and check your work. So in number 8, I'm going to distribute this negative first, so plus, make that a minus, make this a minus. Okay, and then I'm going to factor my denominators. So it's going to multiply to be 2, but add to be 3. That's 2 and 1. Okay, so the common denominator is x plus 1, x plus 2. So the first fraction already has the common denominator, so I don't need to multiply by anything. So I'm just going to cross out the denominator and write the numerator. Same thing for the second one. So minus x minus 5 equals, so this one is missing the x plus 2 from the common denominator. So multiply by x plus 2. And then we are going to solve this equation normally, right? Nothing's being squared, so we're just going to get x by itself. So combine your like terms. Then I'm going to subtract by 2. So negative x minus 6 equals x. Add x to both sides. So negative 6 equals 2x. Divide by 2. So x equals negative 3. Okay, number 9. We're going to factor, so x plus 4, x plus 1, right? It multiplies to be 4, but adds to be 5. Okay, the common denominator is x plus 4, x plus 1. So the first one already has my common denominator, so I don't need to multiply by anything. The second one is missing x plus 1, so I got to multiply the numerator by x plus 1. Lucky us, we get to FOIL. So I get x squared minus 3x plus x minus 3 equals, and this already has our common denominator, so we don't need to multiply by anything, so equals 13. Okay, let's combine our like terms. So x squared minus 2x, 1 minus 3, that's minus 2, equals 13. Now notice I have an x squared left, so I have to solve by factoring. Okay, so I have to get everything set equal to 0. So x squared minus 2x minus 15 equals 0. And then I'm going to factor. So x and x, it's got to multiply to be negative 15, but add to be negative 2. So minus 5 plus 3. Set both equal to 0. So x equals 5, x equals negative 3. And there's our 2 answers. Okay, and that's it. That's it for rational equations, rational expressions. We are done. Okay, if you have any questions on these, please feel free to email.